Hi everyone and welcome to The Exchange, your resource for 1031 market intelligence and education. My name is Tom Wall, partner here at Anchor 1031, and this is episode 3 of our 4-part series talking about the structure of a DST. In our last episode, we talked about how sponsors are not allowed to renegotiate new leases. So how do they operate multifamily and self-storage? The answer is a master tenant lease structure. If you're involved in structured real estate investments, particularly in DSTs, then understanding the master tenant lease structure is crucial. It can offer stability, encourage a conservative operating strategy, but it does come with its own set of complexities. So, what exactly is a master tenant lease and how does it work inside a DST? Like I mentioned, the IRS prohibits a DST from renegotiating leases. So the question is, what do you do about multifamily or self-storage properties that have leases turning over annually or even daily? Or what do you do about a net lease property that tenant goes bankrupt or doesn't sign a new lease? To overcome this issue, sponsors have created the master tenant lease structure. Essentially, the master tenant lease is an agreement where the property owner, in this case the DST, leases the entire property to a single entity known as a master tenant, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of the sponsor. Now, the master tenant can then sublease the property to individual tenants. This structure within a DST is set up to provide two major benefits. The first being that it provides flexibility for the sponsor to manage multiple subleases without any question of compromising the 1031 exchange status of that DST. Second, it gives investors predictable and stable income. The DST and therefore DST investors receive consistent rental income from the master tenant regardless of the occupancy levels of sublease spaces. Steady cash flow is particularly appealing for investors who prioritize that predictable income. To make the master tenant lease structure work, a sponsor has to maintain adequate reserves and they have to underwrite really conservatively just to make sure that the base rent provided by the master lease is actually received by the DST. Now, stable income of course sounds great, but what risk does this structure add to an investment? One major concern is complexity. There's often a 3-tiered rent structure that consists of base rent, additional rent, and bonus rent. And distribution forecasts in the pro forma are a combination of these 3 tiers. Sponsors employ different revenue strategies, and some are entitled to a percentage of one or more of these revenue tiers. So it's important for investors to understand how cash flow is actually going to be distributed to DST investors and how sponsors earn their revenue so we can uncover any potentially obscure risks or unpleasant surprises when we go to actually calculate cash flow. Another risk to consider is the fact that the lease can't be broken or renegotiated without potentially compromising the 1031 exchange status of that DST. So it's really important that the property actually produces enough revenue to cover the distributions that are dictated by the master lease. To make sure of this, conservative underwriting and adequate reserves are especially important because on top of the master lease obligation, DSTs, again, they can't do capital calls. They can't renegotiate or refinance their loans. We talk about that in a previous video where we go over the 7 deadly sins of DSTs. So how are you, the investor, supposed to think about all these risks when it actually comes time to sit down and review an actual DST private placement memorandum and start making decisions for your family and for your 1031 exchange? The first step is to perform your own due diligence on the master tenant lease. We'll teach you how to do that. Make sure you understand it. Take your time to review it. It's usually located in the private placement memorandum or PPM. If you have any additional questions, ask your registered rep, your advisor, the sponsor. We're happy to walk you through it. And make sure you speak to your legal counsel and your CPA as well. Next, it's important to understand if and how the sponsor makes money in the lease to make sure that their incentives are aligned with yours. Take a look at the bonus rent. Does the sponsor take a piece of that? Do they take all of it? Either way, it's not necessarily good or bad. Just taking more of that bonus rent can really incentivize the sponsor to increase the efficiency of the property. If property does better, they make more money, aligned incentives with investors might be a good thing. But at the same time, it can take away some short-term income from DST owners. Just something to think about. We also need to understand what preventative measures are in place in case the master lease is compromised. There are a few mechanisms that can be employed to save a DST if they're not producing enough rent or revenue to actually cover the master lease obligation. For example, sponsors have levers built into the DST that they can pull if you have a single tenant net lease building, the tenant goes bankrupt and is no longer paying rent on the property. So that's our overview of the master tenant lease structure. Thank you so much for listening, and please join us for the final episode of the series. We're going to cover those emergency mechanisms just in case a master lease is threatened. Again, my name is Tom Wall, partner at Anchor 1031. Thank you so much for checking out Exchange Insights, your resource for 1031 intelligence and education. Sign up on our website at Anchor 1031 for a consultation, set up a call with myself or anyone on our team. Talk to you soon.